She was dying in his arms when she whispered, "Take off my mask, then you'll know who I am." Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light piercing the ruined dome, illuminating the frantic rise and fall of his chest. Miles Corbin, late of Earth, currently trying not to die on some forgotten rock in the Kepler 186 system, cradled the fractured form against his torn flight suit. Her armor was a lattice of exotic alloys, charred and sparking faintly, but it was the faceplate, now cracked down the middle, that felt alien and wrong. He hadn't seen her face. Not really. She was one of them, the silent, masked pilots, who had crash-landed their sleek, obsidian vessel near his makeshift shelter 2 cycles ago. He'd been hiding, scavenging, trying to piece together a way off this planet after his own survey craft had bought it. He hadn't expected company, especially not the kind that moved with such predatory grace, even when wounded. He'd found her half buried in rubble, the only survivor. His first instinct had been caution, maybe even fear. Their kind were legends, whispers of cold efficiency and ancient power. But she was hurt, badly. His training, dormant since he'd left the service under circumstances he preferred not to recall, kicked in. Basic first aid, improvised splints, careful movement. He got her back to his small, defensible space, a collapsed section of the dome's maintenance tunnels. She hadn't spoken, not a word, only low, pained sounds from behind the mask. Her gloved hands surprisingly warm despite the cool metal gauntlet, weakly lifted and fumbled with the catch at her temple. "The mask," she rasped, the voice a surprising counterpoint to the imposing armor, low, resonant, but edged with a fragile tremor. "Take it off." Her strength was failing. He could feel it, the slackening weight in his arms. Hesitantly, he reached for the intricate mechanism. It wasn't standard issue military tech. It felt ceremonial, sacred even. His fingers brushed the cool, smooth surface near her temple. Another weak gesture guided him to the release. It disengaged with a soft hiss, and the faceplate came away in his hand. He braced himself. For what? He wasn't sure. Some monstrous visage? A face scarred beyond recognition? What he saw wasn't monstrous. It was breathtaking. Smooth, alabaster skin pulled taut over elegant bone structure. A delicate nose, high cheekbones, lips that parted slightly with ragged breaths. And her eyes, they weren't like human eyes. They were vast, deep pools of shifting, iridescent color, like captured nebulae, currently dimmed with pain but holding an intensity that stole his own breath. The most striking feature wasn't on her face, but around it, framed by a cascade of dark hair, the color of a moonless night. A complex pattern of glowing lines pulsed faintly across her temples, down her neck, and disappearing beneath her collar. They pulsed with a soft internal light, mirroring the turbulent colors in her eye. It wasn't paint, not tattoos. It was part of her. She wasn't just masked, she was concealed. Who are you?" he murmured, the words feeling inadequate, stupid even, in the face of her unveiled presence. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. The glowing lines around her face brightened for a moment, then dimmed again. "I am," her voice was weaker now, a mere whisper. "I am Cathar, of the Obsidian Bloom." The name meant nothing to him. Obsidian Bloom. It sounded like poetry or a prophecy. It certainly didn't sound like the designation of the silent, lethal warriors he'd heard whispered about in backwater ports. The ones who appeared like ghosts and vanished just as quickly. "Cathar," he repeated, letting the alien syllables roll off his tongue. It felt strange, intimate. Her iridescent eyes, those pools of cosmic light, focused on him, clear and sharp for a fleeting moment. "They will seek the mask," she whispered, her hand weakly reaching towards the discarded faceplate in his hand. "Destroy it. It holds knowledge, identity, a false identity. False identity." He looked at the mask. It felt heavy, inert, but somehow significant. Not just protection, but a symbol, a lie. "Why?" he asked, his mind racing. Who were they? Why did she need to hide? Because, her voice faded again, breath catching in her throat. Because Clythor must die, for the bloom to survive. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Cathar must die. She looked like she was obliging that directive. He felt a sudden fierce protectiveness surge through him, unexpected and powerful. He didn't know this alien woman, didn't understand her words or her world, but she was here, dying, trusting him with her face, her secret, and now with a dying wish that felt less like a plea and more like a command. Destroy the mask. Cathar must die. His rational mind screamed that this was insanity. Get rid of the mask. Get rid of her. Go back to trying to get off this rock before whoever was hunting her found him. But he looked into those extraordinary eyes, saw the flickering light of a spirit that refused to yield even on the edge of extinction. And he knew he couldn't. Not yet. Okay, Cathar, he said softly, his voice rougher than he intended. I'll destroy the mask. But you're not dying, not if I can help it. He gently laid her head back down, repositioning the makeshift supports. He grabbed the discarded faceplate, its smooth surface reflecting the faint light. He needed something heavy, something capable of obliterating exotic alloys. He looked around his meager shelter. Most of his gear was salvaged junk, but he still had his field survival pack. And in it, the mask felt cold, alien, and strangely heavy as he turned it over in his hands. It wasn't just metal. It felt interwoven with something organic, something that hummed with a low, almost imperceptible energy. Destroying it felt less like breaking an object and more like extinguishing a fragile spark. He found the rock he'd been using to hammer loose panels for shelter repair, a hefty chunk of local obsidian. He placed the mask on a flat piece of rubble and raised the rock. He hesitated for a second. What knowledge did it hold? What identity was so dangerous it had to be erased, along with the life of the woman who wore it? The pulsing lines on Cathar's face dimmed further. Time was running out. He brought the rock down. Once, the mask cracked, intricate patterns spiderwebbing across its surface. A low, keening sound, like a dying note from a forgotten instrument, emanated from it. He hit it again, harder, and again. The metal shrieked under the impact. The organic hum died. Bits of alloy and some strange crystalline substance flew outwards. When he was done, only shards and dust remained. Nothing recognizable. He looked back at Cathar. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes closed. The faint glow of the lines on her skin seemed almost gone. Panic clawed at him. Destroying the mask was one thing. Keeping her alive was another entirely. He wasn't a medic. He had limited supplies. He was just a guy who got stranded. But he'd seen her face, heard her voice. She was real. She wasn't just one of them anymore. She was Cathar, and she was his responsibility now. His makeshift shelter wasn't a hospital, but it was dry and relatively safe. He cleaned her wounds as best he could with salvaged antiseptics, bandaging the worst of the gashes and burns. The armor was a complex puzzle he didn't understand, fused in places, ripped in others. He managed to gently remove some of the smaller damaged plates to access her injuries, revealing more of that strange alabaster skin marked with glowing lines. They were concentrated around key points, wrists, ankles, the hollow of her throat, where they gathered into intricate patterns. He worked carefully, his hands trembling slightly. He was intimately aware of the alienness of her body, the different musculature he could feel beneath the skin, the subtle variations in bone structure. Yet, beneath the exotic physiology, the wounds were terrifyingly familiar. Trauma was trauma, no matter the species. She needed advanced medical attention he couldn't provide, a stasis field, cellular regeneration, something beyond gauze and antiseptic wipes. He had a comm unit, but it was low power, short range, and useless out here in the middle of nowhere. His ship was gone. Rescue wasn't coming. It was just him, Cathar, and whatever had done this to her, likely still out there looking. He finished the bandaging, covering her with a thermal blanket salvaged from his pack. Her breathing was still shallow, but it was there, a fragile hold on life. He sat beside her, watching the faint, dying glow of the lines on her skin. He thought about the mask, now dust. A false identity, she'd said. Cathar must die. What did that mean? Was Cathar the false identity, or the true one? And who was she, really, beneath even this revealed face? He settled in, resting his back against the cold metal wall of the tunnel. He needed to stay awake, to watch her, to listen for any sign of danger. The silence of the ruined dome pressed in on him, broken only by the faint echo of his own breathing and the fragile sound of hers. He hadn't signed up for this. He just wanted to get home. Now he was alone on an alien world, with a dying alien woman who carried secrets that could get them both killed, and he couldn't bring himself to regret taking off the mask. He watched her sleep, or perhaps lie unconscious on the precipice of something worse. The iridescent glow on her skin had faded almost completely, leaving only faint, complex patterns visible against the pale light of his emergency lamp. He wondered if the glow was tied to her life force or something else entirely. Her breathing remained shallow, alarmingly so. He checked her pulse again, finding it rapid and thready beneath the exotic skin of her wrist, where the glowing lines converged in a spiral pattern. He felt utterly helpless. He'd done what he could with what he had, but it wasn't enough. He wasn't a miracle worker. He was just a guy who knew how to patch up a few basic injuries and stay hidden. Staying hidden, that was the priority now. Whoever had done this to her would be looking. They wouldn't just abandon their search for a high-value target like Cathar seemed to be. He listened intently, straining his ears for any sound above the wind whistling through the dome's fractured shell. Nothing but the desolate quiet of a dying world. He needed to move her. This spot was only a temporary refuge. He needed somewhere more secure, somewhere that couldn't be easily found or breached. And he needed supply, food, water, real medical gear if he could find any in the wreckage of her ship, though he doubted anything would have survived the impact in usable condition. But moving her in this condition was risky. Any jostling could worsen her injuries. He looked at her again, at the peaceful, vulnerable beauty of her unmasked face. A face he wasn't supposed to see. A secret he was now privy to. He felt the weight of that secret settle on him, heavy and cold. Cathar, obsidian bloom, false identity. Why would she wear a false identity? And what was her true one? Was Cathar the false one, or the name she had to abandon for the bloom to survive? His head ached with the unanswered questions. He needed information, but the source of that information was clinging to life by a thread he couldn't mend. He spent the rest of the cycle watching her, monitoring her breathing, changing bandages that quickly became soiled with strange-colored fluids. He ate sparingly from his dwindling rations. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. By the next cycle, her condition had stabilized slightly, but she hadn't regained consciousness. The glowing lines on her skin remained dim. He made a decision. He had to risk searching the crash site. There might be something there, anything, that could help her. He couldn't just wait here for her to die, or for whoever attacked her to find them. Leaving her alone felt wrong, but staying meant doing nothing. He gathered his minimal gear, double-checked his energy pistol, useless against armored attackers, but might scare off local fauna. He left a small lamp near Cathar, illuminating her face. "I'll be back," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. Hold on. The crash site was about a kilometer away, a jagged scar on the desolate landscape. The obsidian vessel, once sleek and deadly, was now a twisted wreck, buried deep in the impact crater. Smoke still rose in thin tendrils from some parts of the wreckage. The air here tasted of burnt ozone and something metallic, alien. He approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to shift, every creak of the cooling metal sounding like approaching footsteps. He spent hours picking through the debris, a grim scavenger in a graveyard of advanced technology. Most of the ship was slag. Systems were fused, bulkheads warped beyond recognition. He found remnants of their technology, shattered weapon casings, fragments of propulsion systems that looked utterly foreign. He was about to give up, finding nothing but destruction, when he stumbled upon a section of the cockpit that had been partially ejected during the crash. Inside, miraculously shielded by a crumpled but intact plating, was a small secured compartment. It took him an agonizingly long time to pry it open with a salvage tool. Inside, nestled in a protective matrix, were several items. A few small crystalline energy cells he didn't recognize but might be adaptable. A sleek, handheld device that shimmered with internal light maybe a data pad, and a sealed medical kit. His heart, he didn't know alien physiology, but a universal trauma kit might have something, anything, he could use. Bandages, injectables, maybe even some kind of pain suppressant or stimulant. Clutching his meager finds, he scrambled back towards the dome, moving faster now, a sliver of hope sharpening his focus. As he neared the shelter, he slowed, caution returning. Had anything changed? Had anyone been here? The entrance looked undisturbed. He slipped back inside, the quiet immediately enveloping him. He hurried to Cathar's side. She was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed slightly less strained. And the glow on her skin, it was marginally brighter, a faint ethereal pulse returning to the lines around her face. Was it just his imagination? Or had his absence, his search, somehow helped? He immediately opened the medical kit. It was filled with strange vials, shimmering gels, and instruments he didn't recognize. One item, however, looked vaguely familiar, an injector gun. It had several cartridges, each filled with a different colored liquid. There were symbols on the cartridges, alien script, that meant nothing to him, but the device itself seemed intuitive. He found a small diagnostic tool in the kit. He hesitantly pressed it against Cathar's skin. It glowed, scanning her internal state, and projected a complex diagram onto the air above her. A map of her injuries, her failing systems, her vital signs. It was overwhelming. But then one of the cartridges in the kit pulsed faintly, a soft green light drawing his attention. He looked at the diagram again. A section highlighting damage to her internal organs, near her abdomen, pulsed with a matching green. It was a guess, a blind leap of faith, but it felt like the kit was trying to tell him something. He loaded the green cartridge into the injector gun. His hand trembled as he held it over Cathar's arm, near where the glowing lines converged at her elbow. This could be poison. This could kill her, or it could save her life. He looked at her face, so serene and vulnerable, without the mask. He remembered her whisper, Cathar must die, for the bloom to survive. Was this injection part of that? A programmed medical response from her own people, designed to euthanize her if captured or severely wounded? Or was it genuinely meant to heal? He had no way of knowing. All he had was a damaged alien woman, a mysterious medical kit, and a gut feeling. His gut told him to trust the device, to trust the faint, returning glow on her skin. He pressed the injector to her arm and squeezed the trigger. A faint hiss, a brief prickle of light under her skin. He held his breath, watching, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lines on her face and neck pulsed brighter, a wave of soft green light washing over her skin from the injection site. The diagram above her shifted, the green section of damage beginning to shrink, the lines on the diagram slowly mending. Her breathing deepened, becoming more regular. He let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It wasn't poison, it was medicine. Powerful, targeted medicine. He checked the diagram again. Other areas of damage remained, marked in different colors. One particularly large section, highlighting trauma to her chest and lungs, pulsed a deep, angry red. He scanned the remaining cartridges. One was a vibrant crimson. He took a deep breath. He'd made one blind guess, and it had worked. Did he dare make another? He loaded the red cartridge. This felt riskier. Her chest was more vital, the injury more severe. If this was wrong, he looked at her face again. The faint green glow was still present, a sign of the first injection's efficacy. He had to try. He pressed the injector to her chest, over the site indicated by the diagnostic diagram. Another hiss, another flash of light under her skin. This time, the effect was more dramatic. Her body arched slightly, a low sound escaping her lips. Not a cry of pain, but something else, like a gasp of surprised life. The red lines on her chest and throat flared with intense crimson light, spreading rapidly across her skin. The dagger above her mirrored the change, the red area of damage contracting at an astonishing speed. Her breathing became deep and even. The red glow subsided, fading into the soft green that now pulsed steadily across the lines on her skin. She was healing, rapidly. He slumped back against the wall, relief washing over him so powerfully it left him weak. He'd done it. He'd actually helped her. He wasn't just waiting for her to die anymore. He was part of the reason she might live. He stayed by her side, watching the diagram above her, watching the glowing lines on her skin pulse with steady light. Within a few cycles, most of the critical damage seemed to have been repaired. The diagram showed her vital signs stabilizing, returning to normal parameters, whatever normal was for her species. The green light on her skin faded further, becoming a soft, constant luminescence beneath the alabaster surface. It was still visible, tracing the intricate patterns, but it no longer pulsed with the urgency of healing. Her eyelids fluttered, Miles leaned closer. Those incredible eyes, pools of shifting nebula colors, opened. They were clearer now, brighter, filled with a depth and intelligence that hadn't been there before. She looked at him, her gaze steady and penetrating. "You returned," she murmured, her voice still soft, but stronger now without the rasp of pain. "You did not abandon me. Where else would I go?" he asked, a faint, dry smile touching his lips. "This planet's a dump, and I'm not exactly welcome anywhere else." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze unsettling in its intensity. He felt as if she was seeing not just him, but everything he carried, his past, his fears, his reluctant hope. "The mask," she said, her hand going reflexively to her face, finding only smooth skin. "It is gone?" "Yeah," he confirmed. "I broke it. Like you asked." "Good," she said, a flicker of something he couldn't identify, relief, resignation, in her eyes. "It is done." "What was in it?" he asked, unable to contain his curiosity. "The knowledge, my designation," she said simply. "My role, and the oaths bound to them." She pushed herself up slightly, wincing, but clearly much stronger. She looked around the dilapidated shelter, her eyes sweeping over the rusted metal, the rubble, the meager evidence of his survival. "This is your den." "It's what I call home right now," he replied, a touch of sarcasm in his voice. "Cozy, huh? All the modern conveniences, except food, water, and a way off the planet." She looked back at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. "Amusement? Your species possesses curious defense mechanisms," she observed. "You use irony?" "It beats crying," he said, dryly. She considered that for a moment. "Perhaps. Though I find direct expression more efficient." Efficient. That word again. It was part of the legend of her kind. Cold, calculating. Yet here she was, frail and injured, speaking in a soft voice, her face open to him. "You said you were Cathar of the obsidian bloom," he prompted. "You said Cathar must die for the bloom to survive. What does that mean?" Her expression grew serious again. The faint glow on her skin seemed to dim slightly as she spoke, as if the truth held a cold edge. "The obsidian bloom is not merely a name, it is, I was the vessel." The vessel. Another term that resonated with ritualistic meaning. A vessel for what? Her gaze became distant, looking past him as if seeing something far away. "For the resonance, the collective memory, the wisdom, the life force of my line. It has passed from vessel to vessel through a ritual's merging. That sounded intense. And Cathar was the false identity? "No," she said softly. "Cathar was the vessel, my given name. But the Cathar who crashed here, she was no longer fit to carry the resonance. It was a cleansing, an attempt to sever the chain." "A cleansing?" he frowned. "Like an execution?" "Precisely," she confirmed, her voice flat. "My lineage is threatened. An ancient enemy seeks to extinguish us, to break the resonance entirely. They targeted me, the vessel, knowing that if I was corrupted or destroyed before the merging, the line would be crippled." "Corrupted? Destroyed? What kind of enemy did that? Who attacked you?" "The scourge," she said, and he heard the deep-seated loathing in the single word. "Interdimensional parasites. They feed on vital energy, on the resonance itself. They cannot be fought conventionally. They must be starved, cut off from their source. Interdimensional parasites that fed on life force and collective memory." Great. Just what his crappy day needed. "And they thought killing you would starve them?" "If I died before the resonance could be passed," she explained patiently, as if explaining complex physics to a child. The accumulated power of centuries would dissipate. They would gain nothing. It is better, in their view, to destroy the supply than let it fall into the wrong hands, or be used against them. She paused, looking at him again. When I saw my ship was falling, the resonance, it instructed me. The mask, it held a programmed null identity, a last resort. If the vessel could not be saved, the identity of Cathar was to be erased, along with the resonance within me. A final defiance, better lost than consumed. So the mask didn't just hide her, it was a suicide switch, a way to destroy herself and the lineage power rather than let it be taken. But you didn't die, he pointed out. And I broke the mask before, whatever that process was, finished. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth entered her eyes. No, she agreed. I did not. Interfered. Interfered. He supposed that was one word for saving someone's life. You healed me, she continued, her voice softer now. With the kit, the diagnostic tool guided you. Yeah, he said, feeling a strange sense of pride at her recognition. It pulsed green for the first shot, red for the second. I figured they matched the injuries. That is the mark of kin, she said, touching the glowing lines on her wrist. It resonates with the resonance, with the living energy of the bloom. It guides the healing. John and the merging, mark of kin, resonance, merging. This was getting deeper into alien ritual than he'd ever expected to go. Okay, he said slowly. So, you're healed, mostly. The scourge is still out there, looking for you, and your family. Your bloom needs the resonance you carry. What now? She looked out towards the entrance of the shelter, her gaze distant. The resonance, it is depleted. The attack took much. I cannot perform the merging ritual in this state. Merging ritual? Is that how you pass on the resonance? She nodded. It requires two beings, aligned, a vessel and a receiver. A deep, complete connection, skin to skin, mind to mind, to transfer the very essence of the bloom. She looked back at him, her iridescent eyes holding a new unsettling intensity. It is our sacred duty to ensure the resonance continues. He felt a prickle of unease. Why was she telling him this? What did any of this have to do with him? He was just a guy who'd stumbled onto her crash site. Okay, so you need to find this receiver, he said, and do the merging thing. And I need to figure out how to get off this rock. Seems like we have different goals. Our goals are aligned, she said, her voice utterly serious. The resonance is not merely power. It is life. It sustains the bloom. Without it, my line withers, dies, and the scourge grows stronger. She pushed herself fully upright, moving with more grace now, though still favoring her side. She looked around the cramped shelter, then back at him. My ship is destroyed. My communication is gone. I am cut off, alone. Except she wasn't alone. He was here. The guy who took off her mask. The guy who healed her. The guy who knew her secret. And the scourge will find me, she finished, her voice low. They can sense the resonance. Faintly, yes. But they will find me. He digested that. So, they were both stuck, and her presence here was essentially a beacon for terrifying interdimensional parasites. Wonderful. So, what do you propose? He asked, running a hand through his hair. That we wait here for them to show up and eat our vital energy. No, she said, her gaze unwavering. We move. We must reach a place of power, a nexus point for the resonance. Only there can the merging ritual be attempted. A nexus point? He raised an eyebrow. On this rock? I haven't seen anything but ruins and dust. There is one, she confirmed. An ancient shrine of my people, hidden, protected. It is where the vessels have always performed the merging. Okay, he said, a reluctant sense of adventure warring with his instinct for self-preservation. Let's say I buy this. You need to get to your sacred shrine to do a magic ritual to pass on your family history before interdimensional energy vampires find you. And I'm supposed to— What? Escort you? She met his gaze directly. You possess skills, she said, her voice recognizing his abilities in a way that was both disarming and oddly formal. Survival, resourcefulness, You evaded detection before I crashed. You knew how to find shelter. You healed me. I patched you up, he corrected. Big difference. No, she insisted. You intervened where death was certain. You read the mark of kin without understanding. You saved the vessel. Her use of the vessel in the third person was strange, like she was talking about someone else, not herself. And you know my face now, she continued, her voice dropping slightly, and my true designation. So I'm a liability, he asked, or a hostage? Neither, she said, a strange softness entering her iridescent eyes. You are tied to me now, by the sight of my unmasked face, by the act of healing, by the knowledge you carry. Tied to her? That sounded even more complicated than being a liability. What does tied mean in your language? He asked warily. She didn't answer immediately, just watched him, her gaze intense. It means you are no longer merely an observer, she said finally. You are part of the pattern. The scourge will sense your connection to the resonance as well now. You will be sought, alongside me. Great. So she wasn't just a beacon. She was a homing device that had just imprinted on him. His dream of quietly fixing a comm unit and signaling for rescue had just evaporated into the dusty atmosphere. So, let me get this straight, he sighed, running a hand over his tired face. I saved your life, which means I know who you are, which means I'm now on the interdimensional parasite hit list too, and the only way out of this mess is to drag you to a mystical shrine so you can perform a ritual that might, maybe, save your people and hopefully somehow get me off this rock. Essentially, she confirmed, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of her elegant head. It is the path with the highest probability of survival, for both of us. Highest probability of survival. It was a pragmatic, logical answer. It also sounded like the craziest, most dangerous thing he'd ever agreed to. But as he looked into her eyes, so full of ancient knowledge and vulnerable hope, he knew he didn't really have a choice. He was already tied. The glowing lines on her skin seemed to pulse with a silent challenge. All right, Kethar, he said, pushing himself to his feet. Where is this shrine? How do we get there? He needed a plan. He needed supply. He needed to figure out how to survive a journey across a hostile planet with a mysterious alien woman while being booted by invisible, energy-draining monsters. Just another Tuesday. Kethar described the location of the shrine, an ancient structure nestled deep within a mountain range, a place of stillness and power hidden from the world. Getting there would be a journey of several cycles across treacherous terrain. They would need to be stealthy, avoiding open areas and sticking to the shadows. She moved with surprising agility, a testament to the speed of her species' healing, though he could see the underlying fatigue in her posture. Her movements were economical, fluid, like a predator conserving energy. They gathered what little they could carry, Miles packed his remaining rations, water purification tablets, his energy pistol, and his basic tools. Kethar, despite his insistence that she conserve her strength, retrieved a long, slender staff from the wreckage of her ship. Not a weapon in the conventional sense, but something crafted from dark, shimmering material, inlaid with patterns that mirrored the glowing lines on her skin. It felt light but impossibly strong in her hands. The staff of resonance, she explained, holding it with a reverence that transcended practicality. It channels the energy of the bloom. It will guide us and protect us. Protect them against interdimensional parasites. He doubted a fancy stick was going to do much good, but he didn't say anything. He was learning that Kethar's reality operated on principles he barely understood. They set out under the cover of the planet's twilight, a time when the faint, distant stars were visible through the damaged dome's ceiling. The air outside was cool and dry. The landscape was a desolate expanse of cracked earth and stunted, alien flora. They moved quickly, Kethar setting a pace that surprised him. She seemed to know the terrain intimately, navigating by landmarks he couldn't discern in the gloom. Despite his initial skepticism about the staff, he noticed that when she held it, the glowing lines on her skin pulsed faintly, and she seemed to move with even greater surety, avoiding pitfalls and hidden obstacles. It was like the staff, or the resonance within her, was giving her an awareness of the environment he lacked. The first cycle of travel was grueling. They covered significant distance, but the constant tension of being hunted, not knowing when or how the scourge might appear, gnawed at him. Cathar remained silent for the most part, her gaze scanning their surroundings with an intensity that missed nothing. When she did speak, it was usually to point out a danger, indicate a change in direction, or offer a stark observation about their environment or the nature of the scourge. Her voice was always calm, precise, devoid of the emotional inflections he was used to in human speech. "The scourge leave no physical trace," she said once, as they rested in the shadow of a crumbling rock formation. "They exist between dimensions. Phasing in to feed, detection, is difficult. Only the most attuned can sense their proximity." "Great," he muttered. "So basically they could be right on top of us, and we wouldn't know until they start feeding?" "Their influence is subtle at first," she explained, as if discussing the weather. "A sense of draining, of coldness, a loss of focus. Then the resonance weakens. The light dims." He felt a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the night air. A loss of focus. The light dims. It sounded terrifyingly like what had happened to Cathar after the attack, before he'd used the medical kit. Was that what the scourge did? Drain the energy, the light, the very essence of life? "Is that what happened to you?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded slowly. "Yes. The attack, it was swift, brutal. They overwhelmed my guard. They sought to consume the resonance within me. I barely managed the null identity protocol for the mask before the ship fell. Consuming the resonance. It sounded horrific." "How do you fight them?" he asked. "If they're not even fully here?" "You do not fight them," she said. "You evade them, you cut off their access to the resonance, and you strengthen the resonance against their touch." Strengthen the resonance. Was that where the ritual came in? They traveled for several more cycles, the desolate landscape unchanging. Miles's body ached with exhaustion, but Cathar seemed tireless, moving with that same fluid grace. He was amazed by her resilience, her ability to push past pain and fatigue that would have crippled a human. He was also increasingly aware of her presence beside him. The faint glow on her skin, always visible in the dim light, was a constant reminder of her alienness and of the connection that now bound them. Sometimes, when they were hidden and resting, he would watch her, tracing the patterns of light on her skin with his eyes. They seemed to shift and change subtly, like constellations moving across a night sky. He found himself wondering about her culture, her people. The obsidian bloom. What kind of society produced masked warriors who carried ancestral memories in their very being? What did the merging ritual entail? As they traversed a narrow, winding canyon, a sudden, unnatural chill permeated the air. Miles shivered, wrapping his arms around himself. A sense of disorientation washed over him, a strange emptiness in his mind. He felt his focus wavering, his thoughts becoming sluggish. Beside him, Cathar stiffened, the glowing lines on her skin flared, not with the bright pulse of healing, but with a cold, defensive light. The staff of resonance in her hand hummed faintly, emitting a low, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate deep within his bones. "They are near," Cathar whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "The scourge. They can sense the resonance again." His stomach dropped. Near? How near? He couldn't see anything. The canyon was empty, the wind the only sound. "Where?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Everywhere," she said, her eyes scanning the empty air. "They phase into this reality from the spaces between, like a veil thinning." He felt it now stronger, a draining sensation, as if something unseen was siphoning off his energy, his thoughts, his very will to move. He felt cold, not just on his skin, but deep inside, a chilling emptiness spreading through his core. Cathar raised the staff of resonance. The humming intensified, and a shimmering shield of light, the color of her glowing skin, expanded outwards from her, enveloping both of them. The coldness lessened slightly within the shield, the draining sensation receding, but it was still there, a malevolent pressure against the invisible barrier. "The resonance. It resists their touch," Cathar said, her voice strained. "But it is weak, depleted. I cannot hold them off for long." Miles gripped his energy pistol, feeling utterly useless. How were you supposed to fight something you couldn't see? Something that attacked your essence? What do we do? He asked. Run? They match our movement, she said, her gaze fixed on the empty air around them. Running is futile if they are already phased in. The shimmering shield around them flickered. Cathar swayed, her face drawn with effort. The glowing lines on her skin pulsed erratically. My energy's failing, she gasped. The resonance weakens. Miles felt a surge of panic. If the shield went down, he looked at Cathar, at her struggling form, the visible effort it took her to maintain the protective field. He saw the vulnerability beneath the warrior's facade. She needed help. Something he could actually do. He looked around the canyon, bare rock walls, maybe 50 feet high. Cracks, crevices, loose scree. Climb, he said urgently. We can climb the wall. Get to higher ground. Cathar looked at him, surprise flickering in her iridescent eyes. Climb? Yeah, he insisted. Up, out of the canyon. Maybe they can't follow easily there? It was a desperate idea, based on nothing but instinct and the need to move, to do something besides stand there and wait to be drained. She hesitated for only a second, then nodded sharply. Yes, high ground. The resonance is stronger closer to certain energy points. Higher ground might assist. She lowered the staff slightly, the shimmering shield shrinking but still holding. Go, she commanded. I will slow their advance. No way, he said. We go together. I'll lead. Point out the holds. He scrambled towards the canyon wall, spotting a promising line of cracks and protrusions. He started climbing, finding handholds and footholds in the rough rock. He risked a glance back. Cathar was right behind him, moving with surprising speed despite her earlier fatigue, guided by the subtle glow of her mark of kin on the rock face itself. The staff was somehow secured to her back. The shimmering shield stayed with them, a mobile bubble of light pushing back against the unseen pressure. Climbing with the shield around them felt strange, like moving through thick water. The draining coldness was still there, a constant, unnerving presence. He could hear Cathar's breathing behind him, slightly labored, but steady. He focused on the climb, on finding the next hold, on pulling himself upwards. His muscles screamed, but adrenaline surged through him. He was doing something. He wasn't helpless. They reached the top of the canyon wall, pulling themselves onto a rocky ledge, overlooking the desolate landscape. The cold pressure lessened significantly here, the shimmering shield around them expanding back to its full size. Cathar sank to her knees, breathing heavily. The glowing lines on her skin were still bright, but pulsed with exhaustion. That was effective, she admitted, her voice thin. Height disrupted their phase anchor. Disrupted their phase anchor. Good to know. He slumped beside her, his own body aching. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. I'm not exactly Spider-Man. She gave him that faint, strange smile again. Your colloquialisms are confusing, but the intent is clear. They rested on the ledge, the silence now broken only by their ragged breathing and the soft hum of the staff of resonance. The scourge seemed to have retreated, but the feeling of their presence, of their potential return, lingered like a bad taste in the air. We cannot travel further tonight, Cathar said, her voice regaining some of its strength. We must conserve energy. Find shelter right here, Miles said, looking around the rocky ledge. There was a small overhang further along, offering some protection from the wind. It's not the Hilton, but it'll do. They moved to the overhang, creating a small, defensible space. Miles checked their remaining supplies. Not much left. The medical kit had been a godsend, but it was almost empty. He ate a small portion of his rations, offering some to Cathar. She accepted it hesitantly, observing the nutrient bar with apparent curiosity, before taking a small, delicate bite. Her expressions, while subtle, were becoming easier for him to read. He was starting to see the being behind the ritualistic formality, the vulnerable woman who had trusted him with her face. The weight of that trust, of the secret he carried, felt heavier than ever. The glowing lines on her skin softened, settling into a steady, gentle light as she rested. She still looked ethereal, alien, but the longer he spent with her, the more he saw the familiar beneath the exotic, the fatigue in her posture, the pain that occasionally flickered in her eyes, the sheer determination that mirrored his own. He sat beside her in the cramped space, their shoulders almost touching. The air within their small bubble of shelter felt different, warmer, safer than the desolate world outside. The soft hum of the staff of resonance was a comforting presence. He looked at her profile, illuminated by the faint glow of her skin. "Cathar," he said softly. She turned her head, her iridescent eyes meeting his. "Yes, Miles. You said the merging ritual required two beings, a vessel and a receiver. Aligned, deep connection, skin to skin, mind to mind." He hesitated, feeling a heat rise in his face. Despite the seriousness of their situation, what exactly does aligned mean? And deep connection? She watched him, her expression unreadable for a long moment. The glowing lines on her face pulsed slightly. "It means a unity," she said, her voice low, a resonance between the two. "Not merely physical, a joining of spirit, of intent, of being." "Like telepathy?" he asked, thinking of the resonance she carried. "More profound," she replied. "Telepathy is communication. The merging is communion, an exchange of essence, of life." She paused, her gaze holding his. "It is the most sacred act of the bloom. It is why, how the lineage continues. And you need a receiver who is aligned with you?" "Yes," she confirmed. "Someone who can accept the full weight of the resonance, who will protect it, carry it forward." She looked away, her gaze drifting towards the starry sky visible through the overhang. "My intended receiver, he was lost in the attack. He was a kin of the bloom, prepared since birth. His intended receiver, lost." That explained why she was alone, and why she was in such a desperate situation. The pressure of needing to pass on the resonance must be immense. "So now what?" he asked. "You just find another kin, out here?" "That is improbable," she admitted, a rare hint of something akin to despair in her voice. "There are no other kin on this world. No other potential receivers. No other potential receivers." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the staff and the sound of the wind outside. He looked at her, at the vulnerability etched on her face, the weight of her lineage's fate resting on her shoulders. She had no one else, and he was the only one here, the one who had touched her, seen her, healed her, carried her secret. He remembered her words, "You are tied to me now, by the sight of my unmasked face, by the act of healing, by the knowledge you carry." A terrifying, impossible thought began to form in his mind. No, it couldn't be. He was human. She was. Whatever she was, an alien vessel of ancient energy and memory. The merging ritual. It sounded like something far beyond a simple exchange of information. It sounded like a joining, a complete, total union. "Cathar," he said, his voice rough. "This merging ritual, this deep connection, this joining of spirit, intent, being." He trailed off, looking at her, at the soft glow on her skin, the intensity in her eyes. "Are you saying?" She met his gaze directly, her iridescent eyes deep and solemn. The glow on her skin pulsed, not with alarm, but with a quiet significance. "The resonance seeks resonance," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It seeks a conduit, a connection that is aligned." She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. He understood. He was the only one here. He was the only one tied to her. The only one who had seen her, touched her, healed her, knew her secret. He was the only potential conduit for the resonance. The only potential receiver. The merging ritual. With him. "But I'm human," he stammered, the thought feeling alien and impossible. "I'm not kin. I don't understand any of this." "Kinship is not solely of blood," she said, her gaze unwavering. "It is of resonance, of alignment." She reached out a hand, her fingers brushing his arm where the alien medicine had injected the life back into her. The touch was light, but it sent a jolt through him. Not just physical, but something deeper, a faint echo of the hum from her staff. The glowing lines on her skin seemed to reach out towards him, their light intensifying slightly, where she touched him. You connected with the mark of kin, she said softly. You responded to the guidance of the resonance. She wasn't just talking about the medical kit anymore. She was talking about their connection, their shared experience, the strange bond that had formed between them in the ruins of the dome. He looked at her hand on his arm, at the glowing lines that pulsed under her skin. He looked into her eyes, vast and ancient, yet filled with a fragile hope that mirrored his own desperate need to survive. The merging ritual. It wasn't just about saving her lineage anymore. It was about saving them both. It was about survival, and it was about something else. Something that had been growing between them, in the shared silence and danger. A reluctant trust, a quiet intimacy, a connection that transcended species and culture. He didn't know if he could do it, didn't know what it would entail. The merging of essence, of life. It sounded terrifying. But the alternative, waiting for the scourge to find them, for Cathar's depleted resonance to fail entirely. That was certain death. And looking at her, at the woman who had whispered her secret to him, as she lay dying, he knew he couldn't let that happen. All right, Cathar, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. If you think I can do it, if you think I can be the receiver. He met her gaze, the unspoken question hanging between them. Her eyes softened, a profound emotion he couldn't name, swirling in their depths. You are the only one, she whispered. Here, now, you are the one who did not let Cathar die. It wasn't a proposal of marriage, not in any way he understood it. It was a matter of survival, of sacred duty, of a desperate gamble. But in the quiet intimacy of the rocky overhang under the cold alien stars, it felt like something more. It felt like a beginning. They spent the rest of the night on the ledge, huddled together for warmth, the soft glow of Cathar's skin and the faint hum of her staff, the only sources of light and sound. Sleep was difficult for Miles. The weight of Cathar's revelation, the sheer alienness of their situation, and the lingering sense of the scourge's presence kept him on edge. Cathar, however, seemed to find a measure of peace. Her breathing deep and even, the glowing lines on her skin pulsed gently, a quiet affirmation of her Gerar. When the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, painting the desolate landscape in hues of bruised purple and pale orange, they rose. Their journey was far from over. The shrine was still days away, and the threat of the scourge was constant. But now their objective had shifted. It wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about preparing for a ritual, a merging that would bind them in a way he couldn't yet comprehend. As they continued their trek, moving through winding canyons and across rocky plains, their dynamic began to change. Cathar was no longer solely the wounded alien he was protecting. She was also the vessel, the bearer of an ancient lineage, and the one who would guide him towards this extraordinary, terrifying union. She spoke more now, sharing fragments of her culture, the history of the obsidian bloom, the sacred significance of the resonance. She described the shrine as a place built not just of stone but of focused energy, a nexus point that amplified the resonance, making the merging possible. She spoke of the merging not just as a transfer of energy and memory, but as a shared experience, a temporary dissolving of individual identity into the collective consciousness of the bloom. It sounded both fascinating and utterly overwhelming. Will I? He asked one cycle, as they navigated a field of treacherous crumbling spires. After the merging, or will I just part of the bloom? You will remain yourself, she assured him. The receiver is not consumed. They become a conduit, a protector. They gain the knowledge, the strength of the resonance, but they retain their own being, their own light. She looked at him, her gaze steady. You will be Miles Corbin, plus more. Plus more. The thought was both daunting and strangely compelling. What would it be like to carry the knowledge of centuries, the collective memory of an alien race? It felt like a burden, but also an incredible privilege. Their conversations were still punctuated by long stretches of silence, filled with the quiet rhythm of their footsteps and the ever-present vigilance for the scourge. But the silence between them was different now, less empty, more comfortable. He was acutely aware of her beside him, of the faint glow of her skin, the elegant line of her jaw, the way she moved with such quiet power. He found himself watching her, not just as a responsibility, but as a person, An alien person. Yes, but a person nonetheless. They faced minor challenges, sandstorms that forced them to seek shelter, treacherous climbs, the constant low-level anxiety of the Scourge's potential return. Kithar's navigation skills were impeccable, and her understanding of the terrain and environment often saved them time and effort. He, in turn, used his practical skills, fixing damaged gear, finding small pockets of groundwater, improvising solutions to unexpected problems. They were a team, a strange, unlikely pair, bound together by fate and a shared death sentence. One night, while sheltering in a small cave, the feeling of coldness returned, stronger this time. The air grew heavy, the dim light around them seeming to shrink. Cathar raised her staff, the shimmering shield appearing again, pulsing with a desperate, struggling light. "They are closer," she gasped, her body trembling with the effort. Stronger. Miles felt the draining pressure again, a sickening emptiness in his gut. He felt fear, cold and sharp, but beneath it a surge of protective instinct towards Cathar. He looked around the cave, searching for anything at all, that could help. His eyes landed on a pile of dry, brittle alien brush near the cave entrance. "Fire," he suggested, the word feeling inadequate against the unseen threat. "Maybe light, heat, disrupts them." Cathar glanced at the brush, then back at the shimmering shield. Her expression was uncertain. "Resonance repels them," she said, her voice strained. "Physical elements. Their effect is unknown. We don't know what works," he snapped, frustration overriding his fear. "We have to try something." He scrambled towards the brush, pulling out his emergency igniter. Cathar held the shield steady, her strength visibly failing. The glowing lines on her skin flickered, some of them dimming alarmingly. He piled the brush together and ignited it. It caught quickly, dry and volatile, erupting into a sudden, fierce blaze. The light and heat filled the small cave, and something shifted. The cold pressure outside the shield seemed to recede slightly. The flickering of Cathar's glowing lines stabilized. The shimmering shield itself seemed to brighten, fueled perhaps by the sudden surge of energy in the environment. The fire, Cathar breathed, her eyes wide with surprise. "It interferes with their phase state. A localized disruption." "Hell yeah." Miles felt a rush of triumph. "Eat lead, you interdimensional leeches." He added more brush to the fire, keeping it roaring. The Scourge were still out there, a dark, hungry presence, pressing against their fragile bubble, but the fire gave them an edge, a temporary reprieve. They spent the rest of the night feeding the flames, keeping the cave filled with light and heat. Cathar rested, slowly regaining her strength, the glow on her skin returning to its steady luminescence. Miles watched the fire, the dancing flames a symbol of defiance in the face of unseen horror. He also watched Cathar, the way the firelight reflected in her iridescent eyes, the delicate curve of her lips. The fear and tension of the attack had created a new intensity between them, a shared adrenaline, a bond forged in the desperate act of survival. He knew then, with a certainty that resonated deep within him, that he would face any unseen horror, any impossible challenge, if it meant keeping her safe. The shrine was nestled in a valley, a structure that seemed to rise organically from the rock, its lines flowing with an otherworldly grace. It wasn't built stone by stone, but appeared to have been formed from the very energy of the planet. Strange, crystalline formations grew around its base, pulsing with a faint, internal light that echoed the glow on Cathar's skin. As they approached, the air grew heavy with a sense of ancient power, a stillness that felt both sacred and unnerving. The hum of Cathar's staff of resonance intensified, and the glowing lines on her skin pulsed with increasing brightness, mirroring the energy of the shrine. "We are here," Cathar said, her voice filled with reverence. The nexus point. They entered the shrine. The interior was vast, a single cavernous space illuminated by the soft, constant light emanating from the crystalline formations and intricate patterns etched into the walls and ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood a large, circular platform, its surface smooth and dark like polished obsidian, inlaid with luminous patterns that seemed to shift and flow. This was the place, The place of the merging ritual. Cathar walked towards the platform, her posture straight, her movements deliberate. She placed the staff of resonance upright in a small indentation at the edge of the platform. The staff hummed louder, and the luminous patterns on the platform flared with light. "The resonance is strong here," she said, turning to face Miles. Her eyes were bright, filled with a quiet intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. "The ritual can be performed." He walked towards her, his heart pounding a strange, uneven rhythm against his ribs. The air around the platform felt charged, humming with an invisible energy. He was acutely aware of the alienness of the place, of the profound significance of the ritual they were about to attempt. And he was acutely aware of her, standing before him, the vessel of an ancient lineage, trusting him with its fate. What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. "I told you," she said softly. "Deep connection, alignment, skin to skin, mind to mind." She held out her hands to him. Her skin glowed with a soft, inviting light. "We step onto the platform. We connect. Connect." It felt like a vast understatement for something that involved merging essences and carrying the weight of an alien civilization's memory. But he nodded, placing his hands in hers. Her skin felt warm, surprisingly soft against his. The moment their hands touched, a jolt of energy passed between them. Not painful, but intense, like being touched by living light. The glowing lines on her skin flared, and he felt a faint, echoing sensation beneath his own skin, as if invisible patterns were stirring to life. Together they stepped onto the obsidian platform. The moment his feet touched the surface, the luminous patterns beneath them flared, and the entire platform began to glow, the light flowing up around their legs, enveloping them in a soft, warm embrace. "The ritual begins," Cathar whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Do not resist. Let the resonance find its path." He took a deep breath, trying to quiet the frantic thoughts in his mind. No resistance. Let the resonance find its path. He focused on Cathar, on the warmth of her hands in his, on the steady gaze of her iridescent eyes. He let go of his fear, his doubt, his ingrained human skepticism. He opened himself to the unknown. He felt a gentle pressure against his mind, not an intrusion, but an invitation, a subtle pulling sensation, drawing his consciousness closer to hers. The light around them intensified, becoming almost blinding. Yet he could still see Cathar, her face illuminated by the glowing patterns on her skin and the platform. She was incredibly beautiful. He felt the connection deepen, expanding from their joined hands, flowing up their arms, into their bodies. It was like a current, warm and vibrant, connecting his every cell to hers, and then the world dissolved. There was no longer a platform, a shrine, a cave, a planet. There was only light and sound and sensation. He felt Cathar's presence merge with his, not as a separate entity, but as an interwoven thread of consciousness. And he experienced something incredible, overwhelming. Memories not his own flooded his mind, images, emotions, sensations of a life, a lineage, an entire civilization stretching back through time. He saw floating city temples, bathed in light, felt the stillness of arid migration shrines, experienced the fierce loyalty of bloodline oaths, the quiet strength of emotional self-restraint. He saw generations of vessels, felt the weight of the resonance being passed from one being to the next, a sacred chain linking past and future. He saw the scourge, too, fleeting, terrifying glimpses of interdimensional entities, their hunger a palpable darkness against the vibrant light of the bloom. He understood, on a level beyond words, the threat they posed, the desperate need to protect the resonance. He felt Cathar's pain, her loss, the burden she carried, and he felt her hope, her determination, her quiet strength. Their minds were not just connected, they were one, two rivers merging into a single powerful current. In that merged state, physical form became less important. He was aware of her body pressed against his, skin to skin, and it felt utterly natural, a part of the larger merging of their beings. The intimacy wasn't just physical, it was existential. He knew her completely, her fears, her hopes, the very essence of who she was. And she knew him. All of him. His past, his flaws, his longing for a place to belong. He felt her acceptance, not just of his help, but of his very being. It was a feeling of profound connection, of being seen and understood on a level he had never experienced before. The merging intensified, the light around them reaching a peak. He felt a surge of power, ancient and vibrant, flowing into him, through him, guided by Cathar, by the resonance itself. It wasn't just energy, it was knowledge, memory, a sense of belonging to something vast and enduring. He felt the mark of kin appear on his own skin, not as a surface marking but as a pattern of light forming within him, connecting him directly to the resonance. It pulsed with a soft, internal glow, warm and comforting. Slowly, gradually, the intensity began to subside. The blinding light softened. The overwhelming sensations receded. Individual consciousness began to reassert itself, separating from the merged state, but forever altered by the experience. He was Miles Corbin again, standing on the obsidian platform, but he was also more. The light around the platform dimmed, settling back into the soft glow it held before. The hum of the staff of resonance softened to a gentle vibration. Miles and Cathar stood facing each other, their hands still joined. The glowing lines on Cathar's skin were vibrant now, pulsing with renewed strength. And on Miles's own skin, faint but visible against his human flesh, the intricate patterns of the mark of kin glowed with a soft internal light. He looked down at his hands, at the alien patterns on his skin, then back at Cathar. Her iridescent eyes, filled with unspeakable emotion, met his. "It is done," she whispered, her voice thick with awe and exhaustion. The merging was successful. Successful. He felt the truth of it, deep within him. He felt the presence of the resonance, a quiet hum of ancient knowledge and energy that was now a part of him. He felt connected to Cathar, to the bloom, to something vast and ancient. He couldn't begin to fully comprehend. He looked at Cathar, truly looked at her, at the woman who was no longer just the vessel, but the one with whom he had shared an impossible, intimate merging. The woman who had shown him her face and her true self. "Cathar," he said, his voice rough with emotion. What could he say? How could he articulate the whirlwind of feelings, of alien memories, of profound contention that was surging through him? She squeezed his hands gently. "You are the receiver," she said softly. "You carry the resonance now. With me. With you," he repeated. The words settled between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. They were bound now, not just by fate or shared danger, but by the very essence of their beings. The merging ritual wasn't just about saving the bloom. It was about creating a bond, a partnership that transcended species and culture. The scourge still threatened. Their journey wasn't over. But now, they faced it together. Two disparate beings united by a sacred ritual and a love that had bloomed in the most desolate of places. Cathar's voice, amplified by the resonance within her, echoed slightly in the chamber. The scourge. They will sense the strength and resonance now. Our merging, it has drawn their attention. Miles felt it too, a subtle shift in the air, a growing sense of dread outside the protective energy field of the shrine. The successful merging had saved the resonance, but it had also announced their presence. Their fight wasn't over. "How long do we have?" he asked, his hand going instinctively, the faint glow of the mark of kin on his arm. The resonance within him responded, a flicker of ancient knowledge informing his intuition. "Not long. Minutes, perhaps," Cathar confirmed, her gaze sharp and focused. She released his hand, stepping back slightly. The staff of resonance pulsed with energy. They cannot phase into the shrine directly. The nexus point repels them, but they will surround it. Wait for us. Wait for them. There was no escape, not through evasion anymore. They were cornered. Miles felt a surge of fear, but it was different this time. It was tempered by the strength of the resonance within him, by the quiet determination he felt emanating from Cathar. He was no longer a lone human trying to survive. He was Miles Corbin, receiver of the bloom, standing beside the vessel. "So," he said, squaring his shoulders, "we fight." Cathar looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. A true smile this time, filled with a depth of emotion that resonated with him. "We fight," she agreed. She picked up the staff of resonance, holding it ready. The luminous patterns on her skin flared with brilliant light, and Miles felt the mark of kin on his own skin respond, glowing brighter. The knowledge of the bloom surged within him, guiding him, strengthening him. He understood the scourge now, not intellectually, but fundamentally. He knew their weakness, their reliance on feeding on life energy. He knew how the resonance could harm them. "The resonance," he said, the words coming to him with an alien clarity, guided by the knowledge within. "It is light. They are shadow. We fight shadow with light." Cathar nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "Precisely. The staff focuses the resonance. But you, as receiver, you can channel it directly through the mark of kin." "Channel the resonance?" "Through him?" He looked at his glowing hands. He felt the power within him, vibrant and ready. The hum of the staff intensified, matching the pulse of light on their skin. Outside the shrine, the pressure of the scourge intensified, a palpable wave of cold dread washing against the energy barrier. "They were here." Cathar raised the staff. "Together," she said, her voice strong and clear, a perfect blend of alien formality and personal resolve. "Vessel and receiver. Bloom and human. Human." The word felt strange, foreign in this context. Yet utterly right. He was human. And he was part of something else now. "Together," Miles echoed, stepping up beside her. He held out his hands, the mark of kin glowing brightly. He focused on the power within him, on the connection to Cathar, to the bloom, to the vast reservoir of ancient energy he now carried. He felt the resonance surge flowing through him, out through his hand, a wave of pure light, the same ethereal glow as Cathar's skin, erupted from him, joining the light from Cathar and her staff. The combined energy struck the barrier of the shrine, amplifying it, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Outside, they heard it, a high, keening shriek, not of pain, but of frustration and something that sounded like hunger, denied. The pressure against the barrier lessened for a moment, then returned with renewed force. The scourge weren't giving up. Cathar and Miles stood side by side, channeling the resonance, their combined light pushing back against the unseen enemy. The shrine hummed with power, the crystalline formations pulsing in sync with their own glowing skin. It was a battle unlike any Miles had ever imagined, fought not with bullets or bombs, but with light against shadow, essence against consumption. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating. As they held the line, the pressure of the scourge ebbed and flowed. There were moments of desperate struggle, when the darkness seemed to press in on them, and moments of defiant power, when their combined light drove the enemy back. They fought through their exhaustion, drawing strength from each other, from the resonance that now flowed between them. In the heat of the battle, the formality between them dissolved entirely. They communicated without words, their intentions flowing through the resonance, a silent understanding that transcended language. He knew when Cathar needed his strength, when she was flagging, and she knew when he was pushing past his limits. They moved together, two halves of a single whole, protecting the sacred space and the future of the bloom. The climax stretched on, a timeless struggle against an enemy that existed just beyond their perception. Miles learned to sense the weak points in their defense, the moments when the scourge were phasing in, and channel the resonance outwards, blasting them back with focused bursts of light. Cathar, using the staff, created larger defensive shields, while Miles acted as a more precise weapon, targeting the individual incursions. It was a desperate, grueling fight. Hours seemed to pass, though in the merged state of their consciousness, time felt fluid and distorted. Their bodies ached, their minds were stretched thin, but the resonance within them remained a constant, powerful force. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the pressure outside the shrine began to recede. The keening shrieks of the scourge grew distant. The pervasive sense of coldness faded. Slowly, hesitantly, the enemy withdrew. They had held the line. The scourge were gone. For now. Cathar and Miles lowered their hands, the intense light on their skin dimming to a gentle glow. The hum of the staff softened. The shrine settled back into its quiet power. They stood on the platform, exhausted, trembling, but victorious. They looked at each other, saw the fatigue etched on each other's faces, and the profound relief and understanding in their eyes. Miles felt the resonance settling within him, a warm, comforting weight. He was the receiver. He had done it. He had helped save the bloom, and he had done it with her. Cathar stepped closer, reaching out to touch his face. Her fingers traced the faint glow of the mark of kin on his cheek. "You fought well, Miles Corbin," she whispered, her voice filled with a warmth that sent shivers down his spine. "More than well, you are truly receiver." He leaned into her touch, feeling the deep, abiding connection that now existed between them. It wasn't just the resonance. It was them, Miles and Cathar, human and alien, vessel and receiver, partners, lovers. He didn't know what the future held. The Scourge were still out there. He was still stranded on an alien world. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had Cathar, and she had him. The merging ritual had done more than just transfer power and memory. It had forged a bond deeper than any he had ever known. It had created something new, something extraordinary, born from desperation and sealed with light. In the quiet sanctity of the ancient shrine, surrounded by the fading echoes of battle, they stood together, two beings from different worlds united by a sacred duty and a love that defied all logic. They were the future of the bloom, and they were just beginning.